You're listening to WCAT Radio, your home for authentic Catholic programming.
Lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust consumes, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to True Wealth. I'm Dave Basconi, and here with me is Maria Smith. Hi, Maria. How are you doing on this hot, humid day?
Doing okay inside my very nicely air-conditioned home studio, home office. We're so blessed. We're so blessed in a way, but in another way, I think it's just it's a handicap because we're less able to tolerate bad weather, whether it's the severe cold or the severe heat. So in a way, it's a blessing. We can get a lot more done when we have air conditioning. You know, you're fresher, you're more alert, you're able to work quicker and do more things. But it also makes it much more difficult to tolerate the heat.
Well, I think if you go from one environment to the other, that's the problem. Because I know over the years I've talked to people that work outside. All 4 seasons they're outside. Could be construction, could be anything. But what I've heard from them is once you get used to the heat or the cold, it's not too bad. It's the person that, that works in a heated environment that goes outside to the cold, that's when they really feel it. And I think in a summertime, it's someone who works in an air-conditioned office and comes outside and hits the heat and humidity, they really feel the difference. And I think it's a conditioning process. And matter of fact, I remember many years ago, 2 people, separate incidents, and these were spread out a lot of years in between them, but the same thing happened. These people came up from Florida, and for us, it was the springtime, and I was wearing short sleeves. And he called, and I spoke to this man on the phone. He said, "How's the weather?" I said, "Oh, it's fine. It's great. No problem." And so he comes up. And again, I'm wearing short sleeves, very comfortable, and he ended up going out to buy a light jacket. He goes, "I'm freezing up here. What's the matter with you people?" He literally had to go buy what I would consider a jacket that you would wear in the late fall or very early spring. He was freezing to death, and that was the first one. And then a second one. This fellow was up here in the wintertime. And we'd have to walk from where we were doing a trade show over to the hotel. And it was a 5-minute walk, 10 minutes at most. And it was cold, but I didn't have a coat. It was too much of a bother. And so we had a jacket. You had to wear a tie and a jacket. So we just walked. I walked that way, and he walked beside of me. He had a coat on, a winter coat on. And he said he couldn't understand how anybody could live in this environment up here. He was that cold. And he had a winter coat on. He could not understand how I could, and other people like me could make the trek in this kind of weather.
Yeah.
He was just out, totally outside of his environment. So, but anyhow, that's just who we are. And you're right. It's nice to work in, but it can also be a handicap in sorts if you have to work outside and you don't have a choice.
Yeah, exactly. It is conditioning, as you said. We can become adapted. We can adapt. We can become accustomed to life. Human beings are very adaptable. If we have to get used to something, we will.
Oh yeah. Nothing like survival as a motivator,
Exactly.
Yeah. So, Maria, we were talking before the show that we both seem to have come across something here recently that maybe we should just chat about a little bit. It seemed, to me, it was an interesting topic. So, do you want to read it? You want me to read it? And then we can just share our thoughts?
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, in short, it goes like this. A totalitarian government inflicts pain on the people to get them to believe. Believe is in quotes. To believe in its principles. However, Jesus took the pain himself for people to believe in his message of love. Now, think about that. An oppressive institution inflicting suffering to get compliance versus Jesus suffering for us so that we may believe. Now, which set of believers actually believe? I think that's an easy question to answer by looking at history. People revolted against their government that forced a belief on them versus the early Christians dying for what they believed. So dying to escape something versus dying for something. That's an amazing contrast. And but anyhow, we'll get your thoughts, and then I have another little example I can use about how I think which system works best.
Yeah, I think that what you said is absolutely true, that it's the opposite. With the totalitarian government, it inflicts pain on the people, whereas Jesus took the pain himself. Now, just to extend that a little further, with a totalitarian government, communism, socialism, which proceeds to become communism, like right. the lower step.
Yep.
With that, they sell the lie that too many people swallow, which is socialism, communism will make you free and equal. We will take the money those evil, wicked, rich people have and give it to everybody to share, to be so that everybody can have some. It sounds so wonderful. It sounds so lovely. Yes, the rich shouldn't have so much. We deserve some too. Let's give to other people. Everybody should have. Let's give to me, to others, equality. It sells that lie. And then people don't want to buy Jesus' truth because it's a hard truth. The communistic lie is a soft, enticing lie. But Jesus' harsh truth is this. Jesus took suffering upon himself, and he invites us to do the same. He invites us to take suffering as part of our lives and unite it with his. People don't want that. We don't. Why follow Jesus? He suffered for humanity, and he wants us to do the same. I don't want that. I want what the rich people have. I want money. I want the government to feed me and to give me money, to give me what I deserve. I want everybody to be equal. So therein lies the difference, that Jesus took his suffering and wants us to do the same, and we don't want to. We want the easy lie, the easy life, the inviting lie.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good point about which version people believe, because one is soft and comforting and inviting, and Jesus is almost, whoa, you expect me to do that? I think what I've learned from reading about socialism and communism is that people do indeed get equality. They get equality in misery.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's you don't get what you think you're getting. It sounds great. They sell it, and by the time you figure out, what you bought, it's too late. But there is equality, but it's not the equality you thought you were getting. But that's a good point, and something that dawned on me as I was thinking about this, and believe it or not, I find the Jesus approach is the one that works with horses. Now,
the one that works the what?
That works with horses.
Okay.
Yeah, because things that play out in nature, I tend to think are following natural laws, or it's a truth that nature is telling us. And let me just give you a quick little oversight as to why I'm saying that. In order for horses to want to work with you, and not against you, they have to believe what you believe. Again, that's the Jesus approach. Now, can you force a horse to do something by inflicting pain? Yes, but that horse is dangerous to be around because one day it will just snap and revolt, just like people that hit their limit and revolt. On the other hand, a horse that trusts and respects you based on your actions, they'll become your best friend. They believe in you, and they will allow you to become their leader. And that's the relationship you have to have with horses to be safe and to get them to do what you want. They have to believe what you believe. And you don't do that by inflicting pain. Otherwise, like I said, you're going to get a revolt at some point, and it's not going to be pretty. A horse just snaps, and they'll come after you, and you can be, seriously injured, and in some cases killed. So the Jesus approach works, and it works in nature, it works with people, and I think there's many other examples that if we were talking to other people that they could relate their own experience. But anyhow, that's mine, and maybe you have one.
Yeah, that's really good. I had never thought of it that way, and we are natural creatures like horses. Yeah. We also have a spiritual element, but we also are natural, and we have to follow the laws of nature. Exactly.
Yeah. And like I said, I always look at nature as not an exact parallel, but certainly there's many things in common that we have. And so it sets a good template, or it sets a good guideline for us. And then we have to take it one step further to take in our spiritual aspect. And that's where I think some people have a hard time maybe one, they may not think about it, and two, if they do, they may not make the connection, but how I was trying to make the connection earlier with the horses. So, but anyhow, that's just how I see it, and I'd like to hear any other thoughts you may have.
Well, another thing about communism, which really goes back to pretty much what I was saying before, but with communism, there are people who know what they're doing, but I think quite a few of them, a majority of them probably, don't really understand. They really do have, in their hearts, they want to help people. I think I did read a book, this one woman who was in communism for decades, and really she and others like her really seemed they wanted to help the downtrodden, they wanted to help the poor, they wanted to make life better for people. Just the way they were going about it was the wrong way. So with communism, it really does take a lot of Christianity, Christianity really makes every human being equal in dignity, not in capability, not in many other ways, but in dignity. Every human being is created in the image and likeness of God. And so there is an equality, there is a justice to the human person in Christianity. And communism tries to give a facsimile of this. It's a fake equality, but people do buy into it. Communism tries to force people to be good and to share. Here, you have too much. You have to share. If you don't, we're gonna put you in jail. We're gonna take away your rights. You have to share what you have. Whereas Christianity says basically the same thing, but leaves it up to the free will of each and every individual. Share what you have. Give to others. Give your possessions away. True Christianity, the saints, the martyrs, many of them gave up all their earthly possessions to follow Jesus.
Oh, yeah, and you're spot on with that. And as you said earlier, socialism comes first and then communism. And I've been doing some research on this, and socialism is the soft approach because it does promise equality. But here's the problem. It doesn't take long for the principles of socialism, which basically are two: central planning, which really doesn't work very well over a large area, and the people have to abandon private ownership to a large degree. So what ends up happening is things that used to run pretty smoothly start to become a mess. And it tends to go against the natural person. That's the other thing. You really have to start to look at this from how are we designed. And when you start to have some influences that tell you what you can and cannot do, then you start to get frustrated, and then there's problems in which there's pushback. And then that's when the government has to step in and really start to apply a lot of pressure, and that's when it starts to slide into communism. That's when the government says, okay, you people can't do this unless we take full control and make sure that everybody's doing the job they're supposed to be doing the way we want it. The central planners, no one gets to own anything. We're just going to tell you, show up for work and shut up. There was something I heard many years ago. I thought this was pretty good. It was someone that had escaped a communist country, and he said this. In summary, it works like communism works like this. They pretend to pay us, and we pretend to work. Okay.
That sounds so accurate.
Yeah, he goes, they pretend to pay us, and we pretend to work. I mean, it just all falls apart, and it goes against the natural person. But if you look at Christianity, and like you said, we all have different capabilities, therefore that produces different outcomes. But the person who has surplus, their Christian faith will cause them to recognize that they have more than they need and that others need help, and they will they'll volunteer to share that. That's the Christian approach. So you don't need an oppressive force to cause that to happen. It happens through the love of neighbor and through Christian belief. And it's amazing how well that works. And it gets down to another little slogan that I ran across years ago, and it says, capitalism with morality is a good thing. Capitalism without morality is a bad thing. And that right there, in my mind, just sums it up. Because when you overlay Christianity or Christian beliefs with a capitalistic system, good things happen. But if you take Christianity out of capitalism, people get selfish, you get huge gaps between rich and poor, and you end up with a mess. It's a different kind of mess than communism creates, but it's the same result. You get a lot of misery.
Yes, yeah. With capitalism, without morality, you get what we do have with corporations who don't care about the individual. Corporations, companies, businesses that care about money, period. And then you have families who want their children to do the best in a capitalistic way, make a lot of money, go into this profession. You can make more money there. So it does, the bottom line becomes money with capitalism without morality. And exactly as you said, with Christianity, it's the godly approach. The godly approach recognizes and respects each human being's free will. You have the free will. Give freely from your free will, just like love. Love cannot be forced, and charity or goodness, kindnesses cannot be forced. It has to come from within the person. It has to be their free choice. They have to use their free will to decide, I am going to give this much of what I have. And it really is just realizing that God is the creator, the owner of everything we have. Everything we have comes from God. It all belongs to him. Our intelligence, our possessions, our money, everything belongs to him. So when we receive these things, whatever, if it's our talents, our intelligence, whatever we have received from God, we should do whatever we can to give back to him, because it doesn't even really belong to us. It's a gift from God. What can we do with this gift besides share it with our brothers and sisters, with God's other children?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, but the culture, once you get the culture involved, and it's easy to steer people off the right track. It's so much harder to, as you said earlier, to the hard truth that Jesus told us versus the appealing false, in quotes, truth, the false truth that the culture tries to tell us. But it works, and I think that's a big reason why we are where we are. But hopefully people will, come across something that causes them to think about this a little bit, because it doesn't happen on its own. You have to want to put in the work and the time and do the research, because it can be very confusing, because the people behind it don't really want you to figure it out. They just want you to keep buying into it. And the more you figure out, the more you may start to question. They don't want you looking behind the curtain, because
of course,
you see how it's done, and you go, oh, okay, this is not good for anybody. And so hopefully we can get to a point where people start to, maybe look at philosophy, theology a little bit more. We've talked about that in the past. Those are the subjects or the topics that really have been lost in lieu of or in favor of all these other things that are supposedly more important. But unless someone has a good philosophical approach to life, as well as a godlike approach to life, it's just not going to go well in general for the masses, because that's not how we were designed or created to work. And it's like using a tool the wrong way, or you're trying to use your car as a truck. Pretty soon the car just breaks down because it's not supposed to be carrying 100 bales of hay. So anyhow, that's how I boil it all down.
Yeah, and when you were saying that, it got me to thinking. I don't know if I've ever said this to you or if you've ever heard it before, that theology is the queen of the sciences.
That does sound familiar, and it did come from you. I will say that. Yeah.
Okay.
But I had forgotten it, so it's always good to remind, to hear it again, because it's the queen. Yeah, theology. And didn't we also talk about that philosophy and theology were the sciences back?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, mathematics.
They were the sciences. They were the most important. But of course, you had the Greeks who did, so much with mathematics and geometry and astronomy. You had so much going on there, and everything was considered a study, a science. I believe, I could be mistaken, but I believe the word science means to look deeply into something, to examine it from all the angles. We've gotten such a narrow definition of science now. Science is what you can measure with a microscope or a telescope, and you can have facts and data, and that's it. But science in and of itself is a study, a profound, deep study of anything that we human beings can study, that we can learn about, anything, and that includes philosophy and theology. And philosophy was one of the highest, and philosophy was really the highest you could get, which is what the Greeks did, the highest you could get without having a supernatural being. The highest you could get in the natural, on the human level, was philosophy. You need to have God, and you need to have God reveal things personally to have theology. And theology was considered the queen. Mathematics, astronomy, music. Music was considered, one of the very most important things, and very closely connected to mathematics. And with music, actually, I don't know if you've ever heard this. This is so beautiful. You can actually look it up on YouTube, too. There was something that the ancients believed. What was it called? The something of the spheres, the music of the spheres, that all creation, the universe, the planets, everything makes a certain type of music.
Interesting. Yeah, but I guess that really gets into your definition of what music is or what sound is. I remember as a kid talking about science. Do you remember the question, if a tree fell in the forest and there was no one around, would it make a noise?
I do remember that question, yes.
And do you remember the answer?
No.
Well, I remember, I think I was in the 7th grade when my 7th grade teacher, we were talking about some of the stuff you remember is crazy. We were in the lunch line and we were just chatting, and he asked that, and I didn't really know. He goes, well, a physicist would say that sound is defined as a wavelength moving through the air. Okay, it creates when the tree hits, it causes a wave to move through the environment. So, based on that definition, a tree falling in the forest without anyone around would make a sound. However, someone else, I don't know, I can't remember exactly who we said, an engineer or maybe someone in biology, would say, no, it takes an ear, with the senses of an ear, to interpret those sound waves for sound. That's their definition of sound. So they would say, no, there is no sound because there was no ear to interpret the waves. And so there you go, a physicist versus a biologist. That's those are two separate, opposite answers. And why am I telling you this? What did you say that got me started on this?
Well, I was talking about theology being the queen of the sciences.
Yeah, but anyhow, I went down this path just to try to make a point about the definition of things. Oh, about the notes, music. That was it.
Oh, yes, the music of the spheres, yes.
Yeah, the music. So what's the definition of music? Okay, is it the ear hearing something? I know the sounds of the country. I was talking to some lady, and I told her I love the country sounds, the birds. I love a rooster crowing and all of that. And she goes, "Are you kidding me? I hate that." She was a city person. Okay, now she would be okay with the sirens and the honking horns and the noise of the city, or the sounds of the city, which to her would be fine, and I would call that noise. But the country sounds that I love, and we have a rooster close by. I love when that rooster crows. It just is so relaxing. And she said, "No, I hate country sounds." So there you go. So, this whole thing about what's music, what's sound, it really does get into a deeper discussion. But I can, to your point, every wavelength, every sound in the universe is music to someone or to something. And see, that's kind of a philosophical discussion on music and sound and things like that. And I think if you were to have a group of interested people, that can lead to a much deeper understanding amongst all of them about music and science and all of that. I think that's how these things happen. But if you never have that discussion like we're having, it never happens. It dies. Matter of fact, that kind of thing just kind of dies out in favor of some video game.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, that's so true that we really do need to be able to take more time to discuss and ponder these things. And whereas in our modern life, there's so many distractions. But before we go on, I did have something else I wanted to talk about. What happened this weekend? An event that I went to that was totally, totally amazing, and I want to share it more with you and also with our listeners. We went to hear the testimony of a local priest, a priest who lives in whose parish is in southeastern Connecticut, and he had in 1997 an actual encounter with our Lord Jesus. He had been raised a Catholic, but he was in his 20s and living a very secular lifestyle, doing pretty well secularly, making a good amount of money, and he was actually a bartender and a bouncer in bars. So this was one tough person before he became a priest. I'm sure he's still tough now, but he was also very athletic. He got a scholarship, some kind of scholarship for track to Georgetown University, I believe he went, and he did a lot of stuff. And he was, but when he graduated from college in the early 90s, there were not many jobs available. So he ended up doing bartending, making a lot of money, and enjoying that, and being a bouncer as well. Very tough person, a very, it was living the American life, I suppose, the good life, was doing well. And then one day, his mom gave him a book, and the name of the book was, the name of the book was The Visions of the Children, The Apparitions of the Blessed Mother at Medjugorje. And he wasn't all that interested in it, but he started reading it, just, took it up and started reading it. He said he had read maybe 20, 30 or so pages when he had this vision. Jesus appeared to him, and he said, Jesus was crying, and Jesus showed him the state of a soul that is pleasing to Jesus, and then Jesus, how beautiful, the beauty of a soul that is in the state of grace. And then Jesus showed him the state of his soul, and he said he doesn't remember how long it was. He has no idea how long this lasted, because it was outside of time in a way. And he said, it wasn't like I saw my whole life flashed sequentially. It was like the whole of it was there, all of it, all at one time. He said it was the most beautiful and the most sorrowful moment of his life. This experience, he said, he couldn't even talk about it for years. This experience was so profound that eventually he became a priest, shortly thereafter. But it just totally changed his life. And he said people could see that he was changed, but he couldn't even talk about what had happened. And this is one very strong person, strong personality, strong physically, mentally. I mean, to be a bouncer and to be a track athlete. I mean, he wasn't somebody who was, and he was away from God. He wasn't somebody who was religious. He was just, it was not somebody that you would think would have such an experience. And yet our Lord appeared to him. And then he said that he would really suggest that nobody ask for this experience. He said, it is better not to have it. And some of the people, we were in a church, he actually spoke at a church in Rhode Island, not too far from where we live in Connecticut. And people asked questions after his talk. And he said, why? And one of the people asked, why would you say that nobody should have this experience? He said, because it is one of profound sorrow. It is one that you really see how you appear before God. And he said that every soul, and I believe this, every soul at one point in their lives, most of the people at the point of death, or soon after they die, is when they will see the absolute truth about everything they've ever done. but he had it during his lifetime, and other people have too. I have read stories, which I do believe, but this was the first person, local person, a person I heard, and I had actually heard about him having some vision. I did from a couple of people that I know, some friends who attend his church, so his parish. And so I already knew about the story. So when I heard that he was actually going to speak about it, I really wanted to go because I didn't remember the details. And then, of course, when you get it second or third hand, you don't know exactly what's true, what's not, what the details were. So I was really looking forward to going to this. And he said one of the reasons that it's better not to have it, it's the same thing as what Jesus told St. Thomas. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet believe.
Oh, good point. It's kind of like the imperfect. Boy, you're bringing up all kinds of thoughts here. It's kind of like the imperfect contrition. If you are being contrite because of the fear of something or the pain of something, that's not as good as wanting to change your life and for the love of God. You see, does that sound familiar to you? One is perfect, one is imperfect. They're both good in that you are changing your life, but if you're changing it because of fear of pain, that's not as high a standard that you've come to versus for the love of God. Do you see the connection there?
Yes. Yeah, the servile fear of God versus the filial fear, the love.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. And the other thing is, did he tie into his talk, that's why we have purgatory, is that the soul that just needs purification before it can enter heaven because of, what's happened in the natural before it can become fully, in union with God, has to be, purified through purgatory. Did he bring that up at all?
No, I don't think that was really the point. I think the point was that people need an awareness both of God's love and of the immensity of the offenses that we do against God. So it's both. It's really how much, this is what he said about this encounter he had with Jesus. He understood how much Jesus loved him, and he understood how much his actions, his words had hurt Jesus. He understood both so intensely, so profoundly. And he said, this was simultaneously the greatest moment in my life and the most sorrowful. The other reason not to have this, not to wish this, not to want this, is to spare yourself the heart-wrenching pain. And I have to say, this priest seems, tall, strong, physically strong, mentally strong, such a strong person, such strength, that God knew that he could handle this immense experience. I don't think this experience is for everybody. I personally don't think I could, if I was living away from God and God appeared to me that way, I don't think I could survive it. I am not, my constitution, my makeup, my personality is not like that. In fact, the priest said, when he was a bouncer in the bar, he said, virtually nothing scares me. People have put guns on me, knives on me. I've been knifed in the side. Virtually nothing scares me. Except then he went on, and he didn't really give the details of this. He said, but he had witnessed an exorcism at one point. He said, that scared me. Virtually nothing scared me.
Yeah. This man was very. He was well suited in the natural world as far as the dealings that he was coming up against. But it took the supernatural to maybe get his attention. And think about that. He was picked because of I think God knew what was needed to get another witness to look at where he went. He went from a bouncer, bartender to a priest. And, his story, his witness, carries a lot of weight with people that hear it because he's seen both sides of it. And he's just a perfect example of what people need to do to make the journey. And he did it. That's the other thing. He's not talking about somebody else. He's saying what happened to himself. And so he's an excellent witness to this journey from the natural to the supernatural.
Exactly. It was such a powerful witness, and I agree with him. I don't think it's an experience that we should ask or want to have, but for people who have had it, who have been given this grace and this witness, it's good for them to share it, because many of us really, And I personally believe that, he had it all at once. And I have read stories where other people have had what some people call, he didn't call it this, but some people call an illumination of conscience, where you actually see your soul, the state of your soul. I think a lot of people have this in minor doses.
So you're talking about, we're talking about the spiritual side, because as you were talking, I'm thinking of when people see, like, their blood work, the report that comes back from the lab on their blood work, they go, oh, wow, I'm not in good shape. I thought I was in good shape, but I need to make some changes in my life. But that's a physical thing. And so it's kind of the same thing, but only on the spiritual side of things. When your soul is, if it's in need of repair or need of healing or nutrition, however you want to say it, until you see how what bad shape it's in, you may never even think of it, may never even dawn on you.
Exactly.
And the reason I brought up the blood work thing, Maria, I had blood work done this morning. So it was fresh on my mind, and but that's the connection you can make. The blood work is a tuning into the body and seeing the state of your soul is just tuning into your spiritual life. One other thing that came from yesterday's homily, and I thought this was kind of, in some ways it ties in, because we all think we're much better off than we are, or we're better people than we are. Yesterday's gospel was on the wheat and the weeds. Remember that? About the enemy that sowed well, our priest, and he's the young one, and we love him because he always sets you up. It's Father Federico.
Right, because I've seen them both. Yeah, I've actually not been around for most Saturdays. I remember that one Saturday that I did tune in, they didn't have the show because of what had happened with one of the school children. But and then I've been busy just about every other Saturday. I think this Saturday I'm actually going to make a note. I'm going to try and listen to their. Well,
no, I'm not sure they're doing it. My wife. Because we've gone back to, opening up the church. So.
Oh, that's too bad. Okay, well, I missed it. Whatever. Yeah. Okay.
But anyhow, what he said was, he goes, "Hey, folks, I've got news for you." He goes, we're all thinking we're the wheat. He goes, "I got news for you. We are the weeds." He goes,
"Whoa."
He says, you need to start thinking of yourself as the weed in this garden, because he goes, we all think we're so good, and we're not when we start to really examine our conscience, and when we really start to see ourselves as we really are. Our pride gets in our way. We all think we're the wheat, and everybody else, they're the weeds. He goes, nope, you're the weed. And he goes, I'm a weed. So it all kind of ties in. See, I never thought of that gospel passage in those terms. But when he started bringing it out and making some points, that's really what that priest was in his younger years. He was the weed in the garden. And until he had that vision, he started, losing his weediness to trying to become the wheat. And I think that's not a bad, way to think of it in that person's life. And we all need to do the same thing. We all need to go from being a weed to the wheat.
Yeah. And when we spend time with our Lord, he will show us all the ways in which we are being weeds, worthless, unkind, all of the things. And the thing is, Dave, when our Lord shows us those things, he also shows us at the same time how much he loves us and how willing and able and available he is to help us to become good fruit. The only thing is, he has to show, we can't become better fruit, good fruit, if we deny, if we refuse to look at the parts of us that are weeds, that are worthless. And he can take those parts if we just open up to our Lord and look at the truth of who and what we really are. The truth is very painful. There's that, old maxim, the truth hurts. It really does. The truth is painful. But it's a beneficial, a salutary pain. It's something that can actually help us to become who we are meant to be.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Matter of fact, I heard something. This thing can go on forever because I heard something with a psychologist, and I think I have it right. He goes, if you want to get mad at someone, have them tell a lie about you. He said, but if you want them to really get mad at someone, have them tell the truth about you. And that's the whole point. Sometimes the truth about us is so serious and so foreign that until we are able to sit down and examine the facts, we get upset when really we should be going from being the weed that we really are to trying to become the wheat. There's so many things out there that it all converges. It's just, for different people, they hear different things, but it all comes to the same point. It has to. The truth has to converge on itself. And I've always believed that. It's just trying to sometimes figure it out amongst all the noise.
Yeah, the truth is so important, and it hurts. But you know what we need with the truth, either when we're giving the truth to other people or especially when we have to accept the truth about ourselves. I think it's really unbearable. The truth about who and what we really are is unbearable unless we also realize, unless we can also see how much we are loved, how worthy we are. See, it's a twofold thing. The human person without God is really a very sad creature. The human person with God has a dignity and a worth. And this, you have to have both parts, because there are two kinds of people. There's people who err on the side of presumption. I'm fine. I'm okay. I didn't do anything wrong. What do you say? What are you saying? I didn't kill anybody. So you have the presumptuous people who think, I'm fine. I'm good. And then you have the people like, oh my goodness, I just can't get it straight. I'm not very good. So you have the people who look down on themselves, who put themselves down, beat themselves up, even about minor things. Then you have people who do things that aren't even so minor and say, hey, it's human nature. I can't help it. That's what happens, and are just too casual and too just let it go. What you need is to have the truth, which is in the middle. Yes, each and every human being has a beauty and a dignity that surpasses anything in the creative world. So everybody needs to know how important they are, how important their life is. No other life can take the place of their life. None. They are created in God's image, in his likeness and image, for a very great, tremendous purpose. I don't know what it is, but God knows, and God will tell them. On the flip side, each and every human being is a fallen human being. We are tempted. We are inclined to take the easy road. We are inclined to evil, to selfishness. You have to put them both together. If you don't look honestly at both, one is going to lead you to despair. The other will lead you to presumption. Both are condemnable.
Yeah. And as you started out by saying, the person without God and the person, then you went to the person with God to get the balance. That goes back to what we were saying earlier about capitalism. Capitalism with morality, God, is a good thing. Capitalism without morality, without God, is a bad thing. So there's that common thread in everything. It doesn't matter what it is, whether it's us as people or our endeavors, our institutions. It doesn't matter. You take God out of it, and it just simply doesn't work. It can't, because we have a creator, and we are designed to work in a certain way, and that way is with him as the number one priority in everything we do, whether it's our lives, our careers, our family. And when you don't do that, it falls apart. I don't know. I keep coming back to that. And it doesn't matter how I start out. It always seems to work that way. And you were kind of, as you were saying it, you were putting all the things in place. You were connecting all the dots, which, like I said, parallels something we said earlier.
Yeah, and with taking God out of things makes everything fall apart. If you put God into anything, you can bring the good out of it. And actually, as you were talking, I was thinking, if you put God into communism, what you get is communion, community. You get people actually doing things for other people out of the goodness of their hearts, out of love, out of virtue, and you have a communism, a community, a communion of souls, because God is there. You're doing it for God. You know what you said before is they pretend to pay us? Well, with God, you actually pay the person. You pay them as much as you can, and even more. You're generous. And, we pretend to work with communism. Well, with God in communism or any sort of endeavor, people don't pretend to work. They do it because they want to serve God, and they believe profoundly that it is a privilege to serve God, even if they get almost nothing in payment. And I have the proof of that. You have priests, you have religious. How much money do they get? And do they believe that it's a privilege to serve God in the lowest of the low, in the poorest of the poor? Yes, they believe it is a privilege and an honor to work in God's field, in his harvest. It's a privilege and an honor. And so they don't pretend to work. They work hard for very little financially, economically. I mean, religious do get their food and their clothing, but they get very little. And it's an honor to work for God. And God repays them with abundant generosity.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And that's it. Because communism, there is no God, and that's the problem. That is the problem. I mean, in theory, it's a good thing about sharing, but without God, it doesn't work. The state becomes, the reason they don't need God is the state is the God, or considers themselves to be the God. And as we know, the state, which is just simply made up of certain select people, they're not God. And they are subject to all the vices that come with being human. And it just doesn't work. So, I mean, you can paint this picture any way you want, but it all ends up looking the same. What happens, what sounds good in theory, unless it's carried out in the right way, which, as we've just said over and over, with God involved, it just can't work. It sounds good, but history shows it won't get there. It can't do it. It can't. So anyhow. But,
Exactly. Yeah. And let me just end with a couple of other things that the priest, Father Kevin, said over the weekend. And it ties into what you're saying. There is God and there is no God. There is not anything in between. It's either one or the other. And he said there are no neutral forces out there. There's God and not God.
Yeah. That's right. Jesus even said, "You're either for me or against me. You can't be neutral. You're either for me or against me." I don't remember the exact passage, but you can't sit it out. You take a side whether you realize it or not. And I mean, it's very interesting. I'm sorry. Was there something else that he said? You said there were a couple of things that he said.
No, that was it. That was it.
Okay. Wow. Well, this discussion started out with, a little topic about a government inflicting pain, and we've come full circle, and we brought in a lot of other things, but again, it all ties together. But very enjoyable, Maria. Very enjoyable. So, would you say we've hit the end of our time, like times two?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, let's close with a prayer. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Amen. Take care, Maria. Stay cool, and have a good
You too, Dave. Yeah, you too. God bless everybody. Bye-bye.
Hello, God's beloved. I'm Annabelle Mosley, author, professor of theology, and host of Then Sings My Soul and Destination Sainthood on WCAT Radio. I invite you to listen in and find inspiration along this sacred journey we're traveling together to make our lives a masterpiece and, with God's grace, become saints. Join me, Annabelle Mosley, for Then Sings My Soul and Destination Sainthood on WCAT Radio. God bless you. Remember, you're never alone. God is always with you.
To a production of WCAT Radio. Please join us in our mission of evangelization. And don't forget, love lifts up when knowledge takes flight.